We've been talking about this over and over again the last season about how faith is not a walk in the park, it's a walk in the dark. Faith is only activated when you're walking in darkness. Because when you see, you don't need faith. It's when you don't see, you need the most faith. That's why Paul said, we walk by faith, not by sight. So when the lights are turned off, there's a new sight on the inside that's turned on. It's called the eyes of faith. We walk by faith that sees what God sees, not by what we see. Because what we see will stop us from experiencing what God sees. So Abraham had to work this tension out, and all the odds, you guys, listen, all the odds, his age, his stage, were against him, working against him. 75 years old. Everything was working against Abram. Everything. And he feels like he's in this place of darkness. The devil made his bet. The devil put his bet on Abram. I think he's gonna cave. He's going to come to the end of himself. He's not going to believe you. He's 75. You think, how is it possible that you're going to make what comes from him in descendants a great nation? We're talking about Israel, okay? Before Israel was what Israel was. Before Israel was held in bondage or in captivity for 400 years in slavery in Egypt. This is all way, way before that. But God is forecasting to Abraham. Abraham doesn't know it yet, but forecasting to Abram that this is going to be his descendants. Yes, they will be held in captivity for 400 years, but it will be a great nation. Man, he's living in this tension, darkness. Learning how to walk by faith in the dark, live in the tension between fear and faith. I believe there's so many in this room right now that you've stepped out, you're stepping out, you feel like it's dark, you feel like you don't know what's going on right now, and the devil, let me tell you this, the devil has placed his bet on you. He's going to fall back into his old ways, she's going to fall back into her old ways, their marriage is not going to work out, their parenting's not going to work out, their career's not going to work out, the job's not going to work out. The step of faith's not going to work. You're not going to be healed. It's disappointment. It's all going to go back to the way it was, back to your old ways, back to your old habits, back to your old patterns. The devil's placing his bet on you. You know that? He wants to take you out. You've made a step with God. The devil's making a step to you to say, I'm going to bring you back to where you were. That's what he's doing. He will place his bet on you till the day you die. What he did to Job, he approached God and said, hey, this Job guy that you know, that you love, that's so blameless and so righteous, you take away all his stuff, all his material possessions, and watch, he'll curse you. The devil put his bet on the table. I bet you, God, that if you take away all of Job's stuff, he'll reject you. The devil placed his bet on Job. You know what happened? Job lost everything. You know what happened in the end? Job got everything back and double. Double for his trouble. You know why? Because in the process of pain, in the process of losing it all, the one thing he did not lose is his connection with God. When you are in the process of losing it all and the devil's placed his bet on you, watch what this guy does when he loses it all. You know what God's putting his bet on? And his hope in? And his love in and his faith in is in your ability to see him working when you don't see him working, like we just sang. To see with different eyes here than the eyes right here. My account, my bank account, my wallet may be empty. It may not make any sense how I'm going to move forward, but because God is with me, I'm going to see by faith in the dark the other side. The other side. The side that looks like provision. The side that looks like reward as I walk through this valley or I walk through this what feels like a dark season in my life. You're hearing this morning? He's placing his bet on you, but God has a bigger bet. God has bigger hope, has bigger faith than the devil will ever have, and he's placing his bet on the fact that you will win. You will win. And this is the tension that we're going to fight, and we are fighting right now in this season of life when we feel like it's darkness around us, is the fight of the tension between faith and fear. Let me show you another scripture in Genesis 15, a couple chapters after Abram's given this great promise that doesn't make any sense. and he's launched into the beginnings of a season of what feels like tension and what feels at times like darkness. In chapter 15 of verse 5, then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have. So God gave him a promise, took him through a process. He was reminded over and over again of his age and stage, and all the odds were stacked against him. All the bets were placed on him that it wasn't going to work out. And God then begins to continue to give him confirmation. Hey, Abram, come with me for a second. Journey with me a little bit. I know it's dark right now, but I want you to get out of your tent right now while it's dark, because in the darkness, I'm going to show you the promise. How do you see stars? In the dark. You don't see stars in the daytime. You see stars. You see the promise in the dark. Because that's where your eyes, different set of eyes will begin to turn on. And so God says to Abram, come out with me while it's dark, and I'm going to remind you of what I spoke to you in chapter 12, that I will make you a great nation. I will bless your descendants. I will do amazing things above what you can think, ask, or imagine, and make you famous. And I will literally use you to bless so many people. But I got to bring you to a place where I begin to turn on a different set of eyes in you in the dark. And so come with me, look up into the sky. What do you see? I see stars. Well, all those stars you see, that's your promise. God reveals his treasure and his promises to us in the dark seasons of our life. Some of you need to hear this right now. He needs your eyes to be blinded to what you've always seen, so the eyes on the inside are awakened to what you've never seen. He says here, look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have. And Abram, verse 6, believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. He wasn't righteous because of his behavior. He was righteous because of his faith, his trust in God, his alignment with God's purpose and plan for his life. I want to encourage you in this season, look up when it's dark. Look up when it's dark. Watch what God reveals to you in the dark seasons in this next season. Watch what God reveals to you in this season. Now I'm speaking metaphorically as well. In this season, as it's dark outside and you're going through a hard time and you're letting the lack of light affect how you feel about yourself, how you feel about the season, let God speak to you even in this season. Let him show you things about your life that you've never known before. Because Abram had 25 more years, you guys, of challenge before the promise began to be fulfilled. It began to be fulfilled 25 years later. At 100, at the age of 100. So 25 years of what feels like the tension of faith and fear, walking in darkness, believing for something that doesn't make any sense, and 25 years later at the age of 100, after a whole bunch of confirmations, and you can read through all the chapters, a whole bunch of confirmations along the way, finally, he begins to see a little bit of a breadcrumb that this promise actually will happen through the life of Isaac. Write this down if you're taking notes. When it gets dark, that's when the fight begins. And the fight is between the tension of faith and fear. They're opposites. Faith is not the opposite of unbelief, or unbelief is not the opposite of faith. It's fear. Fear turns into unbelief. Faith says, step out onto the water. Fear says it doesn't make any sense because you'll sink. Once you live by, it doesn't make any sense because you'll sink, you move into unbelief. Fear is the starting point of unbelief and doubt. And these two things live at odds. Are we here this morning? Some of you are in a holiday dream coma right now. You always have what you need when you're in the dark, even if you don't realize it. You always have what you need when you're in the dark, even if you don't realize it. You always have a resource available to you. I would rather live in the dark than live in the light. Hear me out. Because my faith's going to only grow in the dark, not in the light. When everything makes sense, everything's good in the hood, I should be more scared. Because something's going to happen. I'm not saying we want to live in like a bad place. I'm just saying that darkness just means I'm walking by faith all the time. Darkness is not always just like this doom and gloom, like struggle, suffering. Don't think of darkness like that, okay? Think of darkness just like anytime you're stepping out in faith and it doesn't make sense, that's darkness. We could equate darkness as like fear and suffering and pain and sickness and disease and death. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about any time you are walking in faith and not by sight, and you're living the faith journey, you're in a season of darkness. Anytime that you're not living by faith and you're just living by what you see, that's like living in the light. Faith belongs in the darkness. Light belongs where? His light belongs where? In the darkness. That's where you belong. His light is in you. He's the light of the world. Light belongs in the darkness. Light expels the darkness. Faith is that light turned on. Did you hear that? Faith is the light of Jesus turned on in darkness. You go into those seasons by faith to turn on a light to expel out the darkness. That's the whole point of faith. Fear, I believe, is sometimes some people's best friend. I think fear can be an initiator to bring you back to your knees, to trigger and initiate faith. But often fear, when leaned into too long, becomes bondage. It's normal to feel fear every time you step out in faith. Completely normal. You're human, right? You're going to feel fear. But you don't have to let it hold you. You don't have to let it snare you. You don't have to let it put you into bondage. You need to take fear and shove it up faith's butt. No, I'm sorry. I wrote that down and I can get away with a lot, but I think of that, though. I think of that. When I feel fear, I want to take faith and I want to shove it up something. Fear. I want to take faith, I want to put it into fear. Because faith always wins. Faith always wins. Fear always loses. I'm placing my bets on faith while I'm in the dark with God. He's placing his bet on you. You know, my son, a couple years ago, he was going through a season where he felt afraid of the dark. And I remember I was telling him this, I was reminding him of this. It was October 13th of 2017. He woke up on the way to school. I think he told me this. On the way to school, it was October 13th, 2017. He woke up, and on the way to school, he told me, Daddy, he said, because I know he was going through this season of fear of the dark. He said, when I woke up and I saw these angels, these white and yellow circles with wings, he said. This is how he described it. These white and yellow circles at 8 o'clock in the morning, somewhere in that time. White and yellow circles with wings. And these white and yellow circles with wings said to him, don't be afraid. And then he turns to me and says, Daddy, I think I need to talk to Jesus more. That just came out of his spirit. Because in the dark, that's where God also shows up. You know, one of the things that would happen often to Abram in this season, or anybody for that matter in the Old Testament, when an angel would show up or when God would show up, literally in a real way, one of the first things that they would say is, don't be afraid. Because God can anticipate your fear. When you're going through a dark time, when you're going through a hard time, God knows that fear is going to be knocking at your door. When you're believing for something and it might not happen and you have all these what-if scenarios in your mind, what if this, what if that, what if that, fear is controlling you. You're never going to be able to answer all the what-ifs, you guys. Listen, what if tonight you go home, driving home, and your tire goes flat? You just don't know. You can't live in a space of what-ifs. It will grip you. It will literally begin to govern you. Every time you live from that space, and rather than in faith, literally it will begin to direct your life like a maestro directs a choir or an orchestra. It begins to command of you and move you the way that it wants to move you. But it's a normal part of the process. You know, one of the reasons why God speaks to you in dreams, because he knows a different set of eyes will turn on. When do you dream? When your eyes are what? Closed. You close your eyes to what is normally seen, that normally directs your life, And at night, in a dream, God then in darkness, when you're sleeping, opens your real eyes. Dreams are faith in the darkness. Dreams are learning how to see when you don't have your eyes closed. Any dreamers in the house? And even those that didn't put their hand up, you're also dreamers, you just don't know it. You just don't know it because sometimes when you dream, you forget the dream. Your mind is emptied of the dream. But sometimes you'll be in a place at the right time. Some people call it a deja vu. You just know that you're in the right place at the right moment. That's because in that moment, a dream that you had a long time ago was unpacked. Job says it. I can show it to you in Job 33. That in the night while you slumber on your bed, God puts something in your spirit, but he closes it up. So you don't remember it in the morning. But because it's in you, it's invested in you, and you're at the right time in the right place, and you're ready to receive it, the envelope opens, and now your mind connects to what was already in your spirit. It's a whole other teaching. The fight begins when we begin to walk into faith. And more specifically, number one, write this down, when we walk into the unfamiliar. Faith begins to activate when we walk into the unfamiliar. Remember, you're fighting in this tension of faith and fear, always when you're in the dark, when you're stepping out in life and things are happening to you in life. You're always in that tension. You're always in that space, and you're fighting. You're fighting to walk in faith into the unfamiliar. Everyone say unfamiliar. Abraham went into the unknown, into that what if, into that unfamiliar place. Verse 1, chapter 12, the Lord said to Abraham, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. Go to what's unfamiliar. Go to what doesn't make sense. Step out into the unfamiliar. God is calling many of you in 2020 to step out into what's unfamiliar. Do you believe it? Are you here today? Happy Sunday. The unfamiliar. This is a big roadblock for so many because we don't get it. We fear what we don't understand. We fear what's not comfortable. We fear what's unfamiliar, don't we? That's why a lot of people, men especially, okay, I'm just going to attack the men for a little bit. A lot of men will not take the step of commitment in marriage because there's an unfamiliarity to what it may be if they commit themselves long term. They don't have they're not comfortable with stepping out into what feels unknown or unfamiliar, because what's familiar is bachelor life, right? You can control everything. You're your own master of your own schedule, but as soon as you join forces with another and you come into a relationship or a marriage relationship, what plagues men is the fear of commitment. Really, it's the fear of what's unfamiliar. I'm so used to being this that what if this screws up everything that I know? Listen, if your man is not willing to put a ring on it, I'm talking about willing to put a ring on it. Willing. I'm not saying